For years, the world was captivated by the strange case of Gypsy Rose, who murdered her mother, Dee Dee Blanchard. All her life, Gypsy Rose was made to believe that she was a very sick girl, that she suffered from leukemia, muscular dystrophy, and also that she had the mental capacity of a 7-year-old due to brain damage she suffered during birth. Until one day, Gypsy found out the truth. Welcome back to InformOverload, where we tell you about the most interesting news stories we find on the internet. I'm Charlotte Dobre. Leave a like on this video if you've heard of Gypsy Rose before, and subscribe so you never miss one of our future videos. Dee Dee Blanchard was found dead in her bedroom just outside of Springfield, Missouri on June 14, 2015. She was stabbed to death a few days earlier. Her daughter, Gypsy Rose, was nowhere to be found, yet her medications and wheelchair were still in the house. Neighbors believe Dee Dee might have actually been a victim of foul play, and they also thought that Gypsy might have been abducted, until Gypsy was found the next day in Wisconsin with her boyfriend Nicholas, a man she'd met online. Upon examinations, doctors confirmed Gypsy did not suffer from any of the conditions she had grown up believing she had. One doctor believed that she suffered from Munchausen syndrome, which is a mental disorder where a patient or caregiver makes up, exaggerates, or actually creates illness in a person under their care. Why would anyone want to do that? For sympathy and attention from others. Dee Dee had a strange history. Relatives say that when she was growing up, she would steal when things wouldn't go her way. She worked as a nurse's aide, and in 1997 her family was suspicious that Dee Dee had killed her own mother by refusing to feed her. Dee Dee changed her name from Claudine to Dee Dee when her family confronted her about how she was treating her daughter. Dee Dee had made Gypsy Rose believe that she was much younger than she was, and she also gave her medication and made her undergo surgery that she didn't really need. She kept Gypsy under her control through both psychological and physical abuse. Gypsy didn't go to school after 2nd grade and instead was homeschooled due to the reason that her illnesses were so severe. Gypsy taught herself how to read by reading Harry Potter books. Both Dee Dee and Gypsy benefited from her supposed illnesses. They lived in public housing and paid their bills with public assistance Dee Dee had been granted because of her daughter's medical conditions. They also lived off of child support payments from Gypsy's father, whom Dee Dee divorced. They received help from charities like the Make-A-Wish Foundation, Ronald McDonald House, and Habitat for Humanity. They were awarded free flights and trips to Disneyland, backstage passes to Miranda Lambert concerts, and widespread media attention. Gypsy's father Rod continued to pay child support payments, $1,200 monthly, and would talk to his daughter regularly on the phone, especially on her birthday. But the birthday phone chats were granted under condition that her father not mention Gypsy's real age. On her 18th birthday, Rod recalls Dee Dee told Rod not to mention her real age because Gypsy thought she was 14. Gypsy also believed that the only reason why her father was contacting her was out of a sense of obligation, and that he was supposedly an abusive alcoholic when he and Dee Dee were together. But really, it was just a sly ploy to keep Gypsy's father away from her. So how did Dee Dee continue with this charade for so long? Gypsy spent a lot of her time going to various doctors and specialists at the Children's Hospital of New Orleans and the Tulane Medical Center. After a muscle biopsy found no sign of muscular dystrophy, Dee Dee secured treatment for other conditions. Dee Dee said that Gypsy had seizures every few months, so Gypsy was prescribed anti-seizure medication. Gypsy underwent several surgeries and was constantly in the emergency room for minor reasons. After Hurricane Katrina destroyed their apartment, Gypsy and Dee Dee moved to Missouri. Dee Dee kept up the act by shaving her daughter's head constantly to mimic the baldness of a chemotherapy patient. Gypsy was confined to a wheelchair and was hooked up to oxygen tanks and feeding tubes when they left the house. She was fed a children's liquid nutrition supplement called Pediasure well into her 20s. Gypsy was by all accounts a charming girl. She had a childlike voice, she was 5 feet tall, and had virtually no teeth but the biggest smile. It turns out that Dee Dee had some of Gypsy's saliva glands treated with Botox to control her drooling, and Gypsy also claimed that her mother used topical anesthetic to numb her gums before doctor visits, which also allegedly contributed to her tooth loss. All the while, Dee Dee kept Gypsy under control through psychological manipulation and physical abuse. Dee Dee would hold Gypsy's hands in the presence of other people, and when Gypsy said something that might have suggested she was healthy or had a higher mental capacity, Dee Dee would squeeze her hand. And when they were alone, Dee Dee struck Gypsy's open hands with a coat hanger. The charade did not continue forever. Doctors did become suspicious of deceptive behavior. One of those doctors was Bernardo Flasterstein, a pediatric neurologist who ordered MRIs and blood tests and found no abnormalities. He couldn't understand why she didn't walk. He also became suspicious of Dee Dee because Gypsy's muscular dystrophy was not diagnosed by a doctor, and her supposed medical records were destroyed by Hurricane Katrina flooding. But Flasterstein didn't report any of his suspicions to social services. He'd supposedly been told by other doctors to treat Dee Dee and Gypsy with golden gloves. An anonymous caller reported suspicious behavior to the police, suggesting Gypsy was in better health than she claimed, and Dee Dee was using different names for her and her daughter. The case ended up being closed when Dee Dee used the excuse that she was trying to make it difficult for Gypsy's abusive father, Rod, to find them, which was an outright lie. Eventually, Gypsy started to notice strange behavior herself. She had no idea what her real age was for 15 years because Dee Dee forged her birth certificates. She claims that one time she found a real copy of her birth certificate. Confused about the age on it, she confronted her mother, and Dee Dee shrugged it off and said it was a misprint. Gradually, Gypsy started being more independent. After all, she was becoming a woman and she was starting to have interest in boys. She attended science fiction and fantasy conventions in costume, and she attempted to escape the grasp of her mother during one of those events. Eventually, her mother found her in a hotel room with a man she met online. Dee Dee threatened the man with police intervention by showing him a false birth certificate, alleging that Gypsy was underage. Afterward, Gypsy said that her mother smashed her computer with a hammer, and said she would also smash her fingers with that hammer if she tried to escape again. The following 2 weeks, Gypsy was handcuffed to her bed. So why would Gypsy stay with a mother who was so horrible to her? Well, the short answer is she felt helpless. Dee Dee told her daughter she filed paperwork supporting the claim that she was mentally incompetent, so if she did go to police, they wouldn't believe her story. In subsequent years, Gypsy continued to use the internet in secret when her mother went to bed. She made contact with a man named Nicholas Godejohn through a Christian dating website. Nicholas wasn't exactly mentally sound. He had a history of mental illness, a criminal record for indecent exposure, and he also possibly had dissociative identity disorder or autism. Gypsy confided in her 23-year-old neighbor Ale that she and Nicholas had discussed eloping and also started talking about children. The conversations between Gypsy and her online boyfriend became quite graphic, with BDSM elements. Gypsy and Nicholas hashed out a plan for them to meet for the first time, and for Nicholas to meet her mother in Springfield. The plan was for him to show up to a movie theater and bump into them while Gypsy and her mother were at a movie, while both of them were in costume, and then strike up a conversation, and hopefully a relationship. But as soon as they met in person, Gypsy led him to the bathroom where they had intimate relations. And apparently Gypsy didn't think Nicholas was as cute in person, and described him as creepy. Nevertheless, they continued talking online and started planning to kill Dee Dee. In the spring of 2015, Nicholas returned to Springfield. When Dee Dee was asleep, he went to their house. Gypsy let him in and gave him duct tape, gloves, and a knife, and was under the impression that he was going to kill her mother. Gypsy later claimed that she thought he wouldn't go through with it, but he did. She hid in the bathroom while Nicholas stabbed Dee Dee several times while she slept. They then had intimate relations in Gypsy's room, took $4,000 of Dee Dee's cash, and they fled to a motel outside Springfield thinking that they'd gotten away with the whole thing. They got rid of the murder weapon, and Gypsy wore a blonde wig for a disguise. But security cameras caught them on video, and they were found the next day by police. That is when the truth about Gypsy finally came out. She had none of the medical conditions she thought she had. During the trial, the county prosecutor said he would not seek the death penalty for neither Gypsy nor Nicholas because it was an extraordinary case. While incarcerated, most people actually lose weight, but instead Gypsy gained 14 pounds in the county jail because she was so malnourished. Gypsy accepted a second-degree plea bargain and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Nicholas was sentenced to life in prison as he was the one who actually committed the murder. Gypsy is still in prison to this day and accepts responsibility for her actions, but admits she feels freer than ever before. She said on 2020, back in January of 2018, "I feel like I'm free in prison than living with my mom because now I'm allowed to just live like a normal woman." Well guys, I hope you enjoyed this story as much as I enjoyed researching it. If you're interested, there have been several documentaries and shows made on Gypsy Rose, HBO's Mommy Dearest, and most recently the Hulu series The Act. And there's also a tiny little mention of it in the Netflix series The Politician. One of the characters, I believe, is based on Gypsy Rose. That is all for this IO video, but if you want to continue watching this channel, or if you want more to the story, let us know. We've also put together a playlist for you with a bunch of videos just like this one, and make sure you subscribe and turn on the bell so I can see you in a future IO video.